sub-Saharan.
All right, well, let's get this party started. I so appreciate you guys hanging out with us today. We're talking about principle number 4 of Blueprint Process, which is that discovering your purpose is actually an infinite journey. And there's some really, really cool implications behind that principle that we're all here to talk about today. So I appreciate you being on board. And of course, there'll be time for questions if you'd like. Actually, Frank, if you will do what you've done for me in the past, I would appreciate it. So if you do have a question or a comment, please just put it in the chat. And Frank, if you would share that with me and grab my attention when you can, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So I want you to imagine a magic carpet ride. If you were on a magic carpet ride, just by the very nature that it's magic, you wouldn't know what was supporting that carpet, nor would you know where it was going. But whenever I've seen magic carpet rides, like Aladdin would be my best example of a magic carpet ride, they seem to have a faith that that carpet ride was going to take them somewhere pretty cool. So I want to use that as an analogy to help us understand that purpose is not a one and done event. It is not, okay, I know my purpose, I know my blueprint, now I can just go use them, kind of almost with blinders on, expecting that I know what this journey is going to look like, and for the most part, I'm done. It's not that. It's an ongoing investigation, like a magic carpet ride. But the thing powering this magic carpet ride of ours is God. He's the one that not only designed us to fulfill our purpose, but is doing it through us. So this journey is an infinite one because, as we talk about in principle number 1, purpose is a divine event. And since God himself is infinite, our journey to understand how God is moving through us by way of our purpose is also infinite. It must match God. And that's where the trust comes in this magic carpet ride. So even if we're going through massive valleys or ascending high peaks or these hairpin turns that our life can sometimes take, we always have faith that God is the one that's powering it. And so that shifts our focus quite a bit from what am I doing to what is God doing? Now, this is something I've noticed big time with myself and my own journey. Like most entrepreneurs, I took the success of my business upon my own shoulders. As a mom, I took the success of my parenting upon my own shoulders. Bummer. If I'm only relying upon my own ability, you can see why life has its ups and downs, feasts and famines, because we're relying upon ourselves. We're trying to take all these labels and responsibilities on as if we're the ones that are doing them. And inevitably, we're either met with frustration or only temporary success and very little fulfillment because we're always waiting for that other shoe to drop. Instead, if we think of God as the captain of this magic carpet ride, we're trusting him despite the pitfalls, despite the negative circumstances, despite the challenges and walls that we have to overcome. In fact, instead of relying upon ourselves to overcome these things, we're now partnering with him. So unlike what you might think, riding a magic carpet, I'm assuming, at least for this analogy, is not easy. You don't get to just sit back, drink a cocktail. No, you've got to be aware. If that magic carpet ride takes that hairpin turn, if you're not paying attention and grabbing a hold, you might chuck off. So we have to be present with that magic carpet ride. We have to be paying attention. So that's why the action item for today's webinar is going to be to pay attention to how much time you're spending with God. Yep. As you can imagine, if he's the captain of this magic carpet ride, we should be talking to him frequently throughout the day, checking in with him. making sure that we understand what's really going on. For example, we could be paying attention to this hairpin turn and just how dicey it is when God's actually asking us to look ahead. We could be paying attention to the leap that we're about to take when God's actually asking us to keep our eyes on our people and the value that we're bringing them. So it's very, very important that throughout the days, every day, we're spending time with God. And it doesn't have to be over long, but we need to be checking in with the captain of our ride. So I want to get back to this notion that we're responsible for discovering our purpose and fulfilling our purpose. As I mentioned, if we bring that upon ourselves, we're inevitably met with marginal success and a lot of frustration and even confusion. I know, because when I discovered my own blueprint, it was just me, myself, and I. There wasn't a group of blueprint process practitioners. I didn't even know the blueprint process at the time. I was just kind of blindly figuring out what my skills were, what my identity was, what my individuality was, what my value was that I was creating for people. So I went through a lot of wasted effort, being confused and kind of lost in the midst. That's why having the blueprint process and blueprint process practitioners is so helpful. We make up the carpet itself. We help you understand what your supporting document is, what your inherent tools are that you come with, so that you can ride that magic carpet ride a little bit better. So the fact that it is an infinite journey requires, as I said, the first thing, we're checking in with the dude who's in charge of the journey, right? Many times throughout the day. The second thing that I believe that is required is our actual blueprint, which is the carpet itself. So Brandon has an example of what a blueprint looks like. Now, Brandon's blueprint is one of a kind. Nobody else's look like his. I've probably studied, I don't know, 200-300 some blueprints in the course of me doing this. No, I can tell you without a doubt, nobody's blueprint matches Brandon's blueprint, which is, we kind of know this, that each of us are a one-of-a-kind representation of God. He needs us to express him in a way that nobody else can express him, which means we've got to be referring to that document to make sure we're doing what we need to be doing for people. So that's why we uncover our blueprint. So just to give you an example, I've known my blueprint, which looks, it's the same structure as Brandon's. It has different stuff on it. I've known mine since 2007. And the items on the blueprint have not changed, but my understanding of them have. In the beginning, and you would find this too, going through the blueprint process, in the beginning, all you know of your blueprint items is kind of like a dictionary definition. But as I say, uncovering your blueprint, living your purpose, it's an infinite journey. Because your blueprint, Brandon's blueprint there, is God expressing himself in Brandon. So every single one of those items on Brandon's blueprint is God expressing himself in a unique way. So Brandon's job now is to sit back daily, weekly, and look at those things through the lens of, okay, this is God expressing himself in me, as opposed to looking at it through the lens of, this is me. You can see the paradigm shift. If it's me, Tammy, I have my foibles, my weaknesses, my good days, my bad days. If it's God, he's always bringing his A game, and we can trust that. And we can look to our blueprint for further understanding. So even though I've known my blueprint since 2007, I am still today learning new applications and new definitions. Because I said, when I first learned those things, I was just applying the typical dictionary definition to them. But trust me, Brandon's blueprint items are completely beyond dictionary definition. They are multifaceted, they are deep, they're infinitely deep. So once again, Brandon himself is on an infinite journey. Now, technically, the way that looks through the blueprint process is you stay with your practitioner. whomever your practitioner is, you stay with them. Once you know your blueprint, you're not done. You keep talking to them. You keep talking to God, and you keep talking to your blueprint and your blueprint process practitioner, because it's in that ongoing journey that you continue to learn who you are and how you add value. It's ongoing. It's never going to be done. So one, it's not you, and two, it's infinite. Now, the goal of this little talk, and we're going to go to the practitioners here in a minute, but the goal of this talk is to help you understand that you can actually feel a release or a relief from thinking that it's all on you. Mm. And there's another benefit too, I believe, and that is we can let go of that arrival syndrome. So kind of check yourself on this. When you set yourself a goal that you want to achieve in any area of life, isn't typically the thought process one of a stop? So you achieve that goal, you're done. Now, most people, especially goal-oriented people, will continue to set goals. And that's more the mindset. We're never done. Because again, we are representatives of God. It is an infinite journey. So for me, I have my blueprint on the wall, just like Brandon, and I look at it daily to remind myself of who I am, who I'm representing, and that shifts my thought about the day tremendously from it's all on me, I've got to make this webinar today awesome, to God is doing this through me. I get to step back and watch in wonder and awe as he brings this group of people together, and we all express our blueprints together. We all express him together. So looking at my blueprint every day is a great reminder. It's a perspective shift from it's all about me to it's all about God. The other thing it does for me is it helps me make decisions. All of us, all the practitioners have gone through this. Anybody, we come to crossroads all the time where we're met with at least two possible choices. And in today's world, it's often way more than two. It's not actually a crossroads. It's like this massive interstate that's unfolding before us. Curvy roads, hills, valleys, and a bajillion different options now at any given crossroads. Well, if I try to do that on my own without my orienting structure of my magic carpet, I'm left completely confused and scared to death of making the wrong choice. But if I have that thing behind me, as Brandon does, if I know my blueprint, I can go back to that puppy and say, okay, I am not anybody. I'm not everybody. I am Tammy, expressing God in a unique way. God, looking at my blueprint, which of my players do you want me to have at the fore? And I have often used it with myself and clients when making critical decisions, even some not so critical decisions. I had one guy, he loves his family, and he had been feeling like he had not been spending very much time with his family of late. But there was this conference opportunity that came to him that would be, it seemed like really good for his business. So he was really conflicted. Do I go to this conference or do I stay home? So together we looked at his blueprint, and I had him take little stickies. You probably know the kind, little flag stickies. You're not necessarily supposed to write on them. They're so tiny. And he flagged up his entire blueprint with which players would be on the court if he went to the conference. And what we say with blueprint, when we're using our blueprint to make a decision like that, if more than 60% of your blueprint is involved, you should go, you should do it. But if less than 60% is involved, it's not enough to make it worthwhile. So less than 60% was involved in going to the conference. So he stayed home and was grateful that he did so. So you can use your blueprint for that reason as well. Again, in this ongoing journey. Finally, the other reason I often use it is pursuing your purpose is not easy. It's fulfilling, it's energizing. It brings you a sense of conviction and satisfaction, like you feel like you're doing the right thing. But it's not always easy, because our purpose is meant to be light in darkness. We're meant to bring our purpose to bear on tough situations. So it's not always a hip, skip, and a drip. It's heavy stuff, or it can be. So when I find myself heavy laden, brought down in the dumps, I go to my blueprint and remind myself of who I am and why I'm here. It doesn't make the circumstance or condition change, but it certainly changes my perspective. And it aligns me, it reminds me of my alignment with God. So now that thing which seems so heavy, it doesn't seem so heavy, because he's helping, and I know it. I've woken up to it. So that's how Blueprint is an ongoing infinite journey, and we absolutely love it. So the people whom I've invited to the practitioner program are people, they're not just anybody and everybody. They're not just people who say, hey, that sounds good, I might like to do that. No, these people are people I have studied, and I've studied their blueprints. And in studying their blueprints, have realized, oh, yeah, this person has what it takes to take someone through the blueprint process, which means they not only have the skills to do it, they've got the chops, and it's right there in their blueprint, but they also have the passion for it. And it takes both. That's something that we find in Blueprint. In order to be on this ongoing infinite journey, you have to have both, not only the skills, but also the drive, the conviction. So the people that I've chosen for the practitioner program, and many of them are here with us today, are here because I see in their blueprint the ability, the patience, the curiosity, the fascination. Gosh, it just, they love the idea. They're passionate about the idea of empowering the individual voice. These people are very, very special people. And I encourage you, if you're interested in this ongoing journey, that you reach out to one of them. They're all on blueprintprocess.com under the practitioner tab. And if you click on their tab, you can learn more information, and you can reach out to them and all the good stuff. And we, as a group, encourage you, if you're interested in this, check us out. There's no obligation, no commitment. Why would there be? If purpose is an infinite journey, we don't act like that, right? We don't care about stuff like that. If you're interested in the infinite journey, it's very, very important that you take someone along for the ride as a practitioner that you're interested in being with for a very long time. Most of our clients stay with us lifelong, and that's kind of the idea, because you'll find that nobody knows you better than your practitioner. It's pretty cool. All right, so I would like to run through some questions for our panel. And we had some interesting things happen last week that have caused at least one of our panelists to not be able to be on our panel today. So no pressure, but Seth, Bill, Ray, Frank, if any of you would like to answer these questions, please let me know. Otherwise, Brandon and Bill have already agreed to be on this panel. We're missing two of our panelists because of events beyond their control. So if the rest of you would like to answer these questions, please just kind of raise your hand and let me know. So we're going to start with Brandon, and then we're going to go to Bill and Seth, Ray, Frank. If any of you would like to jump in and answer, please just raise your hand, let me know. All right, so the first question, and again, I'm wanting to give you information about each of these practitioners. I want to give you a chance to be able to see them, get to know them a little bit. That's the point of these webinars. So practitioners, feel free in these answers to share a little bit of who you are by way of answering the question. So Brandon, let's start with you, and then we'll go to you, Bill. The first question is, what do you see, Brandon, are the benefits of a lifelong journey of learning?
Oh man, well, growth mindset is in my tower. And to me, a growth mindset is the belief that we continue to develop and grow our abilities throughout our lives. And I think of it like this, the world is changing, growing, becoming more complex. And so if we don't undertake the responsibility of continuing to learn and develop and break out of our comfort zone, however you want to put it, then just by the sheer fact that the world is growing, the world is getting more complex, the world is moving forward. If we aren't, then we're actually declining. And so it's very important for me, not only for myself, but in my teammates to find growth opportunities in them as well, so that together we can help our other teams, right? Because I may have people on my team who they have their own teams,
Yeah.
who they want to see develop and grow. And yeah, I could keep going, but I'll stop there.
I love the idea of expansion. So you're not just keeping it within yourself, infinite journey here. You're seeing it with your team, and then you're seeing that just the reciprocal effect. Then it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And I love that. That is the whole point behind this practitioner program, because wouldn't it be amazing if everyone on the planet knew their blueprint? It just would be so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Hey, Bill, how about
Hey,
you? What do you see are the benefits of a lifelong journey of learning?
Clutter.
Thank you, Bill. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, well, it's really linked to my purpose, and for me, it contributes to a deeper sense of meaning in my life and the stuff around me. So
Mhm.
that's, I guess, the driver behind it. Um, at the basic level, it's the typical thing that you want to be able to make things better. You want to be more productive, and so that's obviously one reason why I like to do it, as well as the fact that it's essentially part of me. Um, but as Brandon said, it's trying to encourage other people to do the same kind of thing, because in the end, we're all responsible for our results. And I don't know about you or anybody else on the call, but I always had a problem um, with conveyor belt learning, conveyor belt education. So
Mm.
from a very early time, many years ago, I started to do my own schooling. And I think that at least with the people that I work with, if they have some curiosity, I try to get them to explore it, to look at it more deeply.
You're saying a couple things that I want to pick up on. Can you explain? I've never heard of that. Conveyor belt learning. Can you explain that?
Well, from a very early age, I was very resistant to sitting in a classroom. So
Get you.
I kind of had a terminology for it. There's some people that are very good at that's what I coined conveyor belt learning. They can go to a school, go to uh, a formal learning process and do very well at it. I like to expand on the things that I find interesting and the stuff that I'm attempting to learn. So consequentially, I get sidetracked very easily.
However, so what I like about what you're, thank you, by the way, the conveyor belt learning, that I definitely had a picture there in my head and I could relate 100%. It's a single track. You may be able to see things off the side of the conveyor belt, but you can't go there because you're in math right now.
Or you get your hand slapped as you're driving down the conveyor belt and you reach out for something that looks interesting or sparkly or shiny.
Yeah,
And I hopped off the conveyor belt a long time ago.
I love it. And the other point that I wanted to accentuate from what you said is this idea of curiosity, learning about what intrigues you, which also ties back to something you said in the very beginning, which is it brings you meaning. I found that very intriguing. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Well, there's only so much you can pick up as you're foraging around for things, and occasionally you'll home in on something that really grabs your interest, really grabs your curiosity, and then you want to explore it. So that's what that's all about.
Yeah.
Basically, it's not letting your curiosity be quelled. I mean, there's times when you have to manage it probably better than I do. But if you don't, if you let it go by, it could be something that might accentuate your purpose, your reason for being.
Yep, absolutely. Which you also addressed. Ongoing learning helps you create more value. And
Right.
if you're following that which intrigues you, then you're naturally motivated to create value in that way. And you're learning, you're amassing this information all the time that's helping you create more and more value. Thank you, sir. Seth, Ray, or Frank, would either of you like to answer this question? I know this is completely spur of the moment and on the spot. You're welcome. Would any of you like to answer? Hey, Frank, what you got?
Yeah, the whole idea of lifelong learning for me is that I can learn and I get to actually turn the light on and show people how I have been able to learn, and they're actually to bring to bear that little known ability, because a lot of people don't think they can learn. It's like, no, that's not my thing. I'm not a numbers person. I don't know language. And it's kind of like the blessing of actually learning, not for learning's sake, because that's the way I can relate to Bill there. It's like the conveyor belt learning is like, hey, you can't be learning that. You got to be over here learning this. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't draw me at all. It's like cardboard. And the ability to go learning for use. That's really what gets me. It's like, why am I learning this? So I can use it. So I can actually deploy what I'm learning here to further my purpose, which is actually to actually help other people turn the light on to actually further their purpose. And we get to have fun with that.
Yeah.
It's like sitting around a group of people that have varying degrees of competency in, like, say, French. And I've been at it for a few years. And people kind of like haltingly come to the group because they're weighed down with this, oh man, I sound like an idiot or a jerk or whatever. It's like, no, you can learn. I know exactly. And people are encouraged. They're actually made more, they're animated by that. And they're going, whoops. They're actually going, it's okay here to learn. I can learn, and I don't have to run. I don't have to run away. I can actually stay.
I love that. That's
It's
that's
something that
it.
draws them anyways. So
Say that again. Sorry.
especially if it's something that they've always been drawn by, but for one reason or hey, get over here and be interested in this, not that, and yanked away from that. And it's like this unrequited love they have that, well, I always wanted to, but yeah. So.
Yeah, I so appreciate the confidence piece. I hadn't thought about that before, that the more you learn, the more you're building your confidence that you can learn, and to your word, that you can deploy that learning. I really appreciate that appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. Ray or Seth, either of you, don't feel obligated. Hi, Seth, what you got? We still can't hear you for some reason.
We can't hear you, Seth.
Cannot hear you, Seth.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, the microphone's off. I see the microphone's off, but we can't hear you. So, Ray, did you want to say something, or should we move on?
All I wanted to say is that I believe that lifelong learning happens whether we want it to happen or not. I think that there is definitely, for most of us, all of us here, it's intentional, but there are others that may not have intentional learning. but they're learning something.
I appreciate that.
So to have intention behind it
Yeah.
is following what it is that, you know, like Bill was saying, getting off the conveyor belt learning. You see something shiny over there and you can go for it and grasp onto it until it doesn't light up for you. But there's intention behind our learning. And I think one way or the other, you're going to grow. It's just, you know, if you have intention with it, there's probably more value to yourself and the world, because whatever, you know, you, as you've said before, you can't take somebody on a path that you haven't gone before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you have that intention, it's,
Yeah, it accelerates the learning. I appreciate what you're saying. And it kind of goes back to what Bill was talking about in terms of curiosity and meaning and value. Those three words are right along blueprint. Blueprint will cause you to be curious about some things and not others. It's actually a great indicator for you, that which you should be learning and that which you should not be learning. If you're not curious about it, don't try to put yourself out there. You have plenty of stuff you actually naturally are curious about, and that's all within your blueprint. And it's your blueprint calling for greater expression, which, to then Frank's point, helps you gain confidence and create more value, as Bill said. Thank you, Ray. Hey, Seth, are you with us now?
I sure hope so.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah.
you're there.
Hey, touchdown. You hit on a lot of the points. I'm excited about the community piece that happens within this lifelong learning experience. For myself, to be told it's okay to be a lifelong learner aligned with Blueprint instead of the crazy guy that had 400 hobbies, none of them really focused. I could go down a rabbit hole like it was no one's business. I would be an expert in something for 22 minutes, and then I would be off on some other experience. So Blueprint really helped focus that. Having my blueprint up on the wall, I can take all of this natural interest that I have and focus it a bit more. So it kind of has cleaned up. I liken it to like cleaning out the garage. You know, you do it every few years, but once you finally have that cleanliness, it's like, holy cow, this place looks great. And your time is spent a little bit better. Your focus is better. You're feeling this magnification of your impact. And that really goes next level, I think, because even when I hear, you know, you ask someone, well, are you a lifelong learner? Well, of course I am. I learned this application, then I learned this thing. I read this book. I read that book. I did all these things and maybe not even understood the connection between all of it or any of the congruences. There's so many ways of looking at it, but the okayness that came from Blueprint, the focus it provided, and then the natural community that happened, because it shifts you from you learning to, as you're seeing kind of in our group, the whole group of us learning, which really is the community part I was talking about. So hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, it sure did. I love that you brought up the community. Thank you. Because I agree with you 100%. First of all, love the clearing out of the garage that the blueprint did for you. This is who I am. I am this, and I'm not that. Yes, Bill, I know that's an awesome book. But I love the clearing out of the garage analogy. Thank you. And I also love enhanced learning when we're all together learning about something common, and how now, just like right now, you guys are hearing different perspectives on the same theme. And we all have very common elements in our blueprint, which allows us to be enhanced even further. I see you, Frank. What's up?
Yeah, Ray asks a question. And he
Okay,
asked,
thank
can
you.
Annie speak as well to this question?
Annie. Hi, Annie. Do you feel like it? Please don't feel obligated, but is there something you would like to weigh in on?
Not yet. No, thank you. I'm just listening.
No problem. We love having you and your cat along for the ride.
Dog, little tiny chihuahua.
Sorry. It was out of the corner of my eye, so I thought it was a cat. I'm so sorry.
Right.
Sorry to your dog. All right, thank you, Frank. Let's move on to actually, guys, let's go to our second and third question if you guys want to answer them simultaneously. And I know some of you are not even aware of this question, but let's go to number 2 and number 3, which is, we just talked about the benefits of lifelong learning. What are some drawbacks to lifelong learning? And what do you do about that? So, and again, you're answering these as practitioners, as blueprint process practitioners. So use your blueprint. Hey, Brandon, what do you see are some drawbacks to lifelong learning, and how do you deal with those?
Well, you're asking a lot of me, because if you just asked me, at face value, I would tell you there are none. There are no drawbacks to lifelong learning for many of the reasons that we've just articulated, myself included. I would say, though, that it can be challenging to be willing to accept that something you've believed for a long time maybe just isn't true, or there's some nuances there that you just weren't aware of, and you weren't aware that you weren't aware of them, meaning this is how you believe, this is how you saw the world. But if you're a lifelong learner, you accept the fact, you're humble, right? You accept the fact that maybe you don't have it all figured out. And so you're willing to take somebody else's perspective. And now, if that perspective challenges your belief, that can be very uncomfortable. And so I guess it's not a con for me. It's still not a con. It's really not a drawback. But there may have been a time in my life when I would have looked at that as a drawback, because yeah, it can be uncomfortable, especially the older you get, the longer you've been around, when you find that the stories you've been telling yourself, the beliefs that you're carrying around, when you find some, oh, maybe that's not how it is, maybe that's not true, right? That could be uncomfortable. And so, again, not a con, but discomfort.
I get that. I so appreciate how you handled that, sir. And I understand exactly what you're saying. My question for you then is, and you've kind of already represented it, how do you handle that then? How do you cope with that so-called reality or that perception?
Well, part of my blueprint is humility. It's, I've redone my tower a couple times. Humility's always in it. It really, for me, is a foundational value that many of the other values and principles, many of them stem from humility. And for me, humility is, I'm confident, and at the same time recognize that I don't have it all figured out. And so when my beliefs are challenged, and that's uncomfortable at first, I just take a breath and I just recognize this is one of those things that, you know what? I didn't have it all figured out in this case. And so then I'm willing to investigate further, and see maybe where there are some things I had right, where are the things I had wrong, and maybe not even right or wrong, but where are the things that I believed and they still make sense to me. And now that I have this new information, they no longer make sense to me. But for me, it starts with that very foundational value and my blueprint of humility.
I so appreciate that. And I know there was another one in there too, the value that you have in learning itself overcomes the perceived drawback. So it's like gold, and you're so
Yeah.
focused on that. Yeah. That it's okay. It's
Well,
a
I
good
believe,
return on investment.
yeah, I also believe that, again, with the growth mindset, I just believe that I can continue to develop. And for me, development, it can mean different things, but when I'm talking about learning new stories and learning that maybe the beliefs I had aren't necessarily the way that I had them in my mind, I believe that that helps you develop, because you are just adding the ability to accept different perspectives, and being able to handle different perspectives means that you'll be able to face more complex situations. And we talked about it earlier. The value of lifelong learning is, hey, the world is going, it's moving. And maybe now more than ever, I'm sure they say this, and every generation says this, but it's just becoming very complex. And so the ability to thrive in that environment, to me, means you have to be willing to accept some different perspectives that maybe you weren't carrying around before.
Yeah, nice. I really appreciate how you turned that into greater value. You're leveraging your learning to create more value for others, and that is at the heart of humility. Thank you, sir. Hey, Bill, how about you? What would you see as the drawbacks or the perceived drawbacks of an infinite journey of learning, and how do you deal with them?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
Depends on what you mean by lifelong learning. I mean, there's, as Ray said, there's that lifelong learning that we are compelled to do whether we want to or not, and you'll continue to do it until you don't. And when you don't, there's no worries.
Yeah.
Because you're not here anymore. And also very similar to what he said, the idea of the intentional side of things is probably one of the bigger answers to the many drawbacks that there are, because there's everything from the expense of accumulating the data to the information overload that one experiences when you do find something and start hobbling down a rabbit hole or squirming down a rabbit hole, or whatever, how we want to put that. So between the expenses and that, and then there's the psychological issues that come with that, like so why are you a lifelong learner? Are you a lifelong learner because you're not quite together? And you need to you have a confidence issue, so you don't think you know enough. Well, I know I don't know enough, so I had to get past the confidence thing a long time ago, because, and that's part of coming to the table with a little bit of curiosity. So there's just a combination of things. Information overload is probably the biggest one that I face, because if I get into something, I do drill down through the rabbit holes. And with what we have available today to learn about certain topics and subjects, you can get an avalanche of information come at you. So it's oftentimes difficult to figure out what exactly you need to do. So I think getting back to what do you mean by that, or what specific life learning are you talking about? I think if some topic really gets your interest and it's something you think you could be passionate about, you have to try it out. You have to look into it. And there's a myriad of ways to do that. There's free webinars that are out there. There's stuff you can do at your community college and go there. There's groups called like Udemy, which is an online learning group that allows you to try it before you buy it. So you can try different things like that. But I think the main way to deal with the drawbacks is to start out with about 4 questions. So why do I want to learn what I want to learn? How will I use what I learn? Because again, as was already stated earlier, not everything you learn is useful. And then who can I talk to about it to find out a little bit more about it before I get myself caught up in the whirlwind of accumulating all the things I need to get to explore the topic. And then the last question is, after you get all that, those first 3 answered, is it worth it? Is it worth it to spend the time on it? Because again, one of the other issues that comes up often is the time limitations that we have. You've got family, you've got a job, you've got other responsibilities. So there's a lot of things that can get in the way. And you want to use a little bit of discernment when you pick on something that you're really going to dig down and study deeply. So yeah. But the other thing that Brandon brought up, which I can't emphasize enough, is that you may learn some things that will challenge who you think you are.
Yeah.
Especially if you come from a lifelong background of being raised a certain way. And all of a sudden in today's world, you're confronted with a myriad of things that will challenge that. At the same time, without having some basis for that, and I think that's where the blueprint process comes in greatly, at least for us as individuals, is the ability to zero in on exactly who you are and why you are. And then once you get those principles down as it relates to that, then you're not as easily distracted.
Yeah. It does the garage clearing thing that Seth was talking about.
Well, that's a big plus too, because there's much to be said about the anchor of owning too many things.
Yeah.
And you can gather way too much stuff to a point where it becomes overwhelming and you don't know where to start.
And that's what I would answer for you by way of the second part of that question, like how do you cope with this information overload? I think you've done an amazing job of discovering organizational tools for note taking. And you actually just did it for us by identifying 4 questions that people could ask as they're approaching learning. And so it's something that you're able to do just naturally, is help people, and yourself included, organize, categorize, disseminate, to simplify, to move forward so you don't get bogged down in that information.
And it's okay too, that if you come
Hey.
across something that suggests that maybe what you're about ready to dive into isn't really for you, then walk away from it.
And that's why I like you saying, you know, try it on for size. We call it in Blueprint, we call it experimental learning. The more you try something, the more you'll realize it either brings me energy or it drains energy. And we know
Yeah.
with Blueprint, if it brings you energy, do it. It's using your Blueprint. Thanks, Bill. Seth, Ray, or Frank, would either of you, any of you, like to? Yes, Frank.
Just want to do
So-
my job. Just want to do my job. Brandon asked the question, what about Henry? Meaning, can you speak to the question? So
What do you say, Henry? Would you like to speak to the question? Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate it. And Ray, I appreciate you also asking Annie. I'm not seeing anything from Henry, so we will move on, but thank you, Frank. So Frank, Seth, or Ray, would either of you like to address this question of what do you see as the drawbacks to an infinite journey of learning, especially as we think of it in terms of learning your blueprint, learning your purpose? What are the drawbacks to that? And then again, how do you cope with those drawbacks?
All right. So Bill mentioned the challenged who you are piece. So like the drawback isn't really a drawback, but it's something to be prepared for. Because in my experience, being through a number of different storms, being the adopted kid always separated from self, coming out of that world through the learning that I experienced in Blueprint, took me to a place where there was so much unloaded that the questions that Bill listed out of who are you, why are you here, what are you doing, why have you spent so much time in the wrong rooms, or a myriad of reasons, like all of these big things start coming out of this learning. So we somewhat jokingly talk a lot of times about aftercare. It's like the conversation after the conversations, as this stuff gets reordered and this clarity happens, and the weights that, you know, in my case, working with Tammy, setting down a weight that I carried for a short 57.5 years. That became so familiar to me that it traveled with me everywhere I went in the world. Like just naturally, like, hey, don't let me, we call it the noxious bag, but it's like, hey, don't let me forget my bag. It just went with me everywhere I went. So through this learning, the identity stuff happens, things start getting offloaded. It's really quite an experience, and kind of circles back to the community piece and aftercare. If you don't have those people to go back to when all of this can get really disconcerting, that can be a thing. But also having real conversations takes learning to a different level also, because particularly in the stuff that I deal with, a lot of these stories have never been told to anyone, ever. So the trust that happens in this space also magnifies the experience of learning, and you know, the bravery that it takes to keep doing this over a period of time, not getting to 6 weeks, which seems to be the magic number. 6 weeks is when things start, we're past the, what I call the sniffing butt phase. And things start getting real, and that's usually the time when someone will look at that experience and be like, nope, it's too late, too hard, too cold, too hot, whatever. And so it takes a lot of bravery to step into that. So those were the things that kind of came to mind as you guys were stepping through.
Thank you. Once again, bringing up that community. I hadn't thought about that either. Like the care and the trust that is naturally engendered when you're with people who are of a like mind. And it usually means, yeah, we've been there. We know what that looks like. Here are things that we used. But everyone's got humility about it, right, Brandon? Because yeah, here are the scratches, here are the bruises. I'm just recently past that phase. So here, please let me help you. It's a beautiful thing that you just brought up with the trust, the love, the support of the community. And actually you saw it happen just here. Ray and Brandon both recognizing that there were other people on the call that weren't getting a chance to ask a question. And Bill, thank you so much, for what you just said with Henry. And Henry, thank you so much for acknowledging the opportunity and yet politely declining at the same time. So there's this question of what are the drawbacks. For me personally, it's a paradigm shift. And again, I appreciate where Brandon and many of you are coming from. It's not so much a drawback as something to be aware of. This massive paradigm shift from I'm going to be done at a particular time. And then I don't think people consciously are aware of this paradigm. And yet we operate around it all the time. I'm done at 5 o'clock. I'm done at the weekend. I'm done when I go on vacation. I'm done when I retire. But blueprint and purpose is an ongoing thing. Like it can happen. It's across the boards. You can do it at home. You can do it at work, and you should be, because it's, again, God expressing himself through you. So we're never done. We're never done. But to Brandon's point, every time you learn something, every time you uncover something, you now can use it not only to create greater value for others, but also as a leverage point to which you now can learn even more. I just recently had this experience where I learned something quite uncomfortable about myself. But now, as I'm still kind of in the raw phase, it's the situation that Brandon brought up where you learn something about yourself that you were kind of blind to before. And so at first it's heart-wrenching and unsettling and etc. But when you recognize that moment of being dashed across the rocks is actually providing you with greater clarity. And what we really know is that what we're in an ongoing journey of learning about. It's not about ourselves. It's not about our people. It's not about even our purpose. It's actually about God. We're learning more about him. And if I have to get dashed across the rocks in order to learn more something greater about God, awesome. Because now I can take that thing I just learned about God because of getting dashed across the rocks. I can now take that thing and use it in other areas of my life. And that's cool. It will bring me that peace of God, that confidence of God. And that's why, to many of your points, learning may be uncomfortable, but it's worth it. And of course, the more we slough off our layers of ignorance, the more value we're able to create. So one more paradigm shift here, or rather an analogy to describe this paradigm shift. I've been talking about it like a magic carpet ride, and it is, because we have no idea where it's going to go. We only know the landscape we're over right now on this magic carpet ride. We know the angle of the carpet. Is it in that hairpin turn? Is it going down some steep cliffs? Is it rising? That's all we know, is where it is right now. So that means there's a lot of uncertainty. Versus when we think that our learning is up to us alone and that it's a fixed game, it's an end game, we feel like we're standing on solid ground. Yeah, but we're standing still, or there's a point at which we will stop. So I think that that analogy helps us shift our thinking. So now our objective isn't security. Our objective is greater learning. And for greater learning, as Brandon recognized, it's a high return on investment for all the times that we get smashed across the rocks. So the action item for today's webinar, and as usual, we'll be meeting the fourth Wednesday of every month to do these webinars. Myself and the practitioners included, always referencing one of our 4 principles of purpose. And next month, so it's August 28th, I believe. Yeah, August 28th is the 4th Wednesday of next month, right here, noon Pacific, this same Zoom link. We'll actually be discovering part 2 of principle number 4, which is our last principle. And part 2 is has an interesting perspective on this, in that with Blueprint, we know that you come fully loaded. You come fully loaded. So even though in the world it looks like you're adding wisdom, that you go out and you get a degree, or you learn something through a rough experience, or you learn something from someone else, a parent, a teacher, a friend, in reality, you have everything already. You came preloaded to this earth with it. So instead of going about trying to add stuff to us, we're actually looking to uncover what's already within us. And as this whole principle talks about, that's an infinite journey, because what you're uncovering is the God that is within you, which is one of a kind. And that's pretty exciting. It's a totally different perspective, which is very helpful, because going back to Bill's point earlier, if we pursue the learning that intrigues us naturally, we are doing just that. We're not trying to accrue knowledge. We're uncovering knowledge. We're making proficient that which is already within us through experience, etc. So super cool perspective. And we'll be talking about that August 28th at noon Pacific. Invite your friends. And so today's action item, sorry, I mentioned that a couple minutes ago and I'm just now getting back to it. It's the way the multiplier mind works. The action item for today is actually prayer. I would like to suggest a prayer. Now, interestingly enough, prayer is typically used as a tool to fix something. You might pinpoint something in your life and be like, yeah, that's broken, that's hurting, that's whatever. So typically, people use prayer to try to fix. But I want us to use prayer to learn. And we're learning about the number 1 topic, which is God. So if that's the reason why we're praying, and it says in the Bible that that's kind of the thing, is we need to know God. And if we know him, then everything else goes swimmingly. Then the more you know about God, the more swimming your life will become. This is cool stuff. So a good prayer is, thank you. I would do this in the morning, and I'll tell you why. Thank you, God, for being the captain of my magic carpet ride today. Thank you for moving in me and through me to do good to your people today. Thank you for bringing me everything I need to shine you in the way that I'm meant to shine you. And thank you for being with me always. So as the dips, the valleys, the turns, the unexpected calamities come, I remember that you're with me, and consequently feel the peace of you. So
Beautiful.
that is a prayer for you. Please use whatever iteration comes to you, fresh every day, but that's the idea. Much gratitude to God for being the king of our carpet rides, And
Yeah.
I will see you all on August 28th at noon Pacific. And thank you so much to the practitioners for being here with me.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Bill, Seth, Brandon, Raymond, Henry, Annie.